Imagine living in a quiet English village, surrounded by fields, ancient churches, country roads, and an old house that seems completely ordinary until the footsteps begin. Then the knocking, the moving objects, the strange sounds, and eventually the apparition of a mysterious woman dressed as a nun. This was Borley Rectory, a house in Essex that became one of the most famous haunted locations in British history. But the story of the Borley Rectory is more complicated than a simple ghost story, because alongside the tales of spirits and unexplained phenomena are accusations of hoaxes, exaggeration, and even fraud. So, today, we're stepping into the story of Borley Rectory and asking one very unsettling question. Was this truly one of Britain's most haunted houses? Or was something else happening behind those walls? Borley Rectory was built in 1863 in the village of Borley, Essex, for the Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull. It was a large Victorian red brick house containing 23 rooms. For many years, the building served as a home of the rectors of Borley. And according to later accounts, stories of strange activity began to circulate long before the house became internationally famous. The building would eventually become associated with footsteps, moving objects, mysterious sounds, apparitions, and stories of supernatural activity. One of the earliest reported phenomenon involving footsteps, a servant who worked for the Bull family reportedly heard footsteps when no other person appeared to be present. Other witnesses later described hearing sounds moving through the house, footsteps in empty areas, doors, knocking, and noises that seemed to have no obvious explanation. Of course, hearing a strange noise inside an old house doesn't necessarily mean that a ghost is responsible. Old building makes sounds. Wood expands and contracts. Wind moves through the walls and chimneys. Animals can enter buildings. And our minds are remarkably good at turning unexplained sounds into something familiar. But at Borley, the stories continue. Perhaps the most famous legend associated with Borley Rectory was the apparition of a mysterious nun. In 1900, several members of the Bull family reportedly saw a woman dressed in what appeared to be a nun's habit in the garden. The figure was said to appear near the house, then disappeared. Reports of the apparition continued over the years, and the mysterious woman became one of the defining images of the Borley haunting. But who was she? That question would become one of the greatest mysteries surrounding Borley Rectory. One legend claimed that centuries earlier, a French nun named Marie Laire had come to England. According to the story, she became connected to the Walgrave family, and I know I pronounced that wrong, I apologize, and eventually met a tragic end. The legend claimed that she was murdered and buried somewhere on the property. Over time, the story became intertwined with the supposed haunting of Borley. But there is an important distinction. The story of Marie Laire is a legend connected with the case, not an established historical fact. And that distinction becomes extremely important when we examine what happened next. By the early 20th century, Borley Rectory's reputation had grown. Then, in 1928, a new rector named Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife moved into the house. According to later accounts, they experienced strange events themselves. The stories eventually became so troubling that the couple contacted a newspaper for assistance. And that decision would change the history of Borley Rectory forever. In 1929, paranormal investigator Harry Price became involved with Borley Rectory. Price was already known for investigating alleged supernatural phenomena. He visited the rectory after being contacted through the Daily Mirror. During his first visit, he reported a series of unusual events, including broken glass and objects apparently being thrown. The Borley case quickly became a sensation. Price would eventually carry out much more extensive investigations. In 1937, he rented Borley Rectory for an entire year so that he could investigate the alleged phenomena. He recruited observers to stay at the property and record what happened. According to reports, there were strange noises, knocking, objects apparently moving, and other incidents that were interpreted as paranormal. Price's 1937 to 1938 investigation involved dozens of observers, including people with professional backgrounds such as medicine, engineering, and the military. But this is where the story becomes controversial. Not everyone was convinced that Borley was haunted. Later investigators questioned many of the claims. Some suggested that certain events could have been caused by ordinary people playing tricks. Others believed that the expectations and rumors may have influenced what witnesses thought they experienced. And some went even further, accusing Harry Price himself of exaggerating or manufacturing evidence. After Price's death in 1948, the Society for Physical Research carried out its own critical investigation into the case. Their conclusions were extremely damaging to the reputation of the Borley investigation. The investigators questioned the reliability of much of Price's evidence and argued that suggestion, rumor, and possible fraud could explain many of the reported phenomena. But the story didn't end there. Supporters of Price disputed some of those criticisms, and the Borley case remains controversial even today. On the night of February 27, 1939, Borley Rectory was badly damaged by fire. The fire was reportedly caused when an oil lamp was overturned. The building was eventually demolished in 1944. But even after the house itself was gone, the legend continued. Investigations continued at the ruins. People still reported strange sounds and unusual temperature changes. There came another remarkable chapter. Evacuations connected with the site uncovered human remains, including a female jawbone. Some believe the discovery might support the old story of a murdered woman buried at Borley. But once again, the evidence was disputed. Questions were raised about the age and origin of the remains. There was no simple answer. One of the strangest images associated with Borley showed what appeared to be a brick suspended in midair. The photograph became part of the mythology surrounding the haunting. But critics later questioned exactly what was happening in the photograph, and rather, there was a perfectly ordinary explanation. It became another example of the central problem with Borley Rectory. How do you separate genuine, unexplained events from mistakes, tricks, exaggeration, and expectations? Today, the original rectory is gone. There is no haunted house to walk through. No mysterious footsteps waiting in an empty corridor. No old bedroom where investigators can spend the night. And yet, Borley Rectory remains one of Britain's most famous paranormal stories. Maybe it's because Borley represents something more complicated than a ghost story. It represents our fascination with the unknown. It shows how quickly a local story can become a national legend. It shows how newspapers can transform mysterious events into something much larger. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us how difficult it can be to determine what really happened when stories are passed from one person to another for decades. And yet, despite all the questions and criticism, the image remains: a mysterious woman in a dark countryside, a figure appearing near an ancient house, a witness looking toward the garden and seeing someone who shouldn't be there. Was she a ghost? A mistaken observation? A prank? Or simply a legend that grew more powerful every time the story was told? Perhaps we'll never know. Borley Rectory is gone, but its story remains. And maybe that is the strangest thing of all, because sometimes a haunted place doesn't need walls. It only needs a story power enough to survive. So what do you believe? Was Borley Rectory truly haunted? Or was the greatest mystery not ghosts, but the people who believed they saw them? Until next time, keep your eyes open, keep your mind curious, and keep exploring the mysteries hidden in the shadows. Love, light, and peace.